So, Laura, just in the time that I've been at Arizona Opera, you've played Jane Witherstein in Riders of the Purple Sage, you've played Freya in Das Rheingold, you're playing Mamah Cheney in Shining Brow. These are three very different characters. When you think about Mamah Cheney, who she is, what's her essence to you?
I think the thing I've been discovering about her, she's just incredibly forward-thinking. So she, in a world where we've sort of, as we've been going through the opera, we've been discovering more and more things about our characters and the relationships. And there was one day it kind of struck me that I think she's basically Frank, like the female version of Frank, but in an era where it wasn't okay for her to be that.
Right.
And so she's part of the affair comes with the idea that she wants to escape the monotony of home life that women were thrust into. And she sees Frank as an equal and escape. And so I think it's a really interesting, because it's conflicted, and you don't always like her because she makes some choices that are pretty selfish in terms of a family unit that she's having to deal with. But she's also a woman who probably wouldn't have chosen that life if she had had the choice. That's
a great answer. And there's some parallels there with Jane.
Yeah.
Of course, we're bringing Riders of the Purple Sage back later in the season.
Which everyone should go see.
Which everyone should go see. But also there another strong woman who bucked convention to a certain extent and was, not living necessarily within a power structure that she was born into.
Makes for good drama.
Makes for great drama. Everyone is the hero of their own story. But Frank is a person who, in the way that he lived his life, created a lot of hardship and drama for the people around him. Your job in portraying Frank is not to do it from the outside, but to do it from the inside and as authentically as possible. How do you take a character like that, who has greatness within him and creates greatness for the world, but also has these flaws, similar to Mamah Cheney, or maybe a personal drive and an individualism that could be hard on the people around him? And how do you live the heroic aspect in an authentic way, in the way that Frank almost certainly saw himself?
I think, to me, the most important thing has been to focus not so much on painting the genius and focus more on painting the flaws. Because we all come to the production, we come to the theater with this idea about who Frank Lloyd Wright is, and so the ideas of genius are already well established. So then I think that the work for us portraying Wright is to show the human side, and a lot of that comes through in these flaws. So the ways that he's insecure, the ways in which he covers up those insecurities and uses bluster as kind of a way to create a persona for himself, which is in the end a large part of the way in which he actually became famous, I think.
Interesting.
I would concur with all of that and just add that I think it's impossible when you're developing a drama to make the drama about the genius. I think the only way in which something is dramatic is that a person, any person, man or woman, can watch it on stage and be like, that's me this morning in a conversation with my wife, or that's me talking to my friends at the bar, or that's how I act at work when I'm talking to the people underneath me, or that's how I feel when my vision isn't reciprocated. And the Opera House is a pretty great venue for larger than life characters to be diminished.
Right.
And I think that Frank Lloyd Wright is just perfect fodder, because he was just an exceptionally flawed little boy that never really came to terms probably with the relationship between his mom and dad. And that's really simple. And thankfully we have these wonderful buildings to sort of that these were the products of that flawed character, because I think that's what it takes.
In my conversations with people in the community, a lot of people are really not connected to the story that we're going to be telling on stage, and I think that's what's so remarkable about this piece is that this isn't a piece of history that everyone sort of feels like they've known and watched a lot on the History Channel. I think we're really sort of uncovering for a lot of folks that story of humanity that that just isn't part of our day-to-day narrative about who this man was. The buildings, they look, they look like they're built into the landscape and so forth. There's just so much more to it than that. What's the experience like of portraying sort of a hero, anti-hero? I guess with Steve Jobs in particular, is it a similar sort of experience, sort of, taking a character like that?
We love heroes and we love icons, and it's biblical, and it's, we love mythology. I think that's one way in which we deal with the drudgery of human life, is to really build up people that aren't ourselves. And Steve Jobs was incredibly flawed, but he's interesting in that he was adopted, and his mom and dad he didn't really have a relationship very strong with his actual biological parents. He had, just like Frank Lloyd Wright, had a very tumultuous young part of his life where he had no control over the narrative. And so same with Steve Jobs. And so you see, as they bud into young men, that they start to really take hold of the narrative of their own lives. And then, of course, once you reach a certain level of respect from just the community, you can really manipulate people. With Steve Jobs, it was the distortion field that his fellow colleagues would talk about, where he'd walk into the room and just take over the conversation, and everyone would be sucked into his world. And that's very much what Frank Lloyd Wright did, was he just sucked a lot of people unwittingly into his orbit, and they bought it. And I just said, it says a lot about Frank, and it says a lot about how vulnerable we are to narrative.
Thank you all so much for your time today. Laura Wilde, Rob McGinness, John Moore. Have a great rehearsal today, and
Thank you.
can't wait for Shining Brow.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Yes.